Have you ever wondered what happens when someone judges a book by its cover and gets it completely wrong? What if that quiet, humble person you're looking down on turns out to be someone who could change your entire perspective on life? This is exactly what happened to Victor Harding when he decided to humiliate a fellow first-class passenger who seemed too ordinary for his taste. The man he mocked, the actual owner of the airline. And what happened next will restore your faith in human decency while teaching a lesson about respect that Victor will carry for the rest of his life. But here's the twist that will shock you. It wasn't this mysterious stranger who delivered the most powerful moment of this story. The Los Angeles airport buzzed with its usual chaos. In the middle of it all, a man stood quietly in the first-class line. That man was Richard Sterling, founder and owner of Sterling Airlines. He wore a simple cardigan sweater, comfortable khakis, and well-worn sneakers. He carried a weathered leather messenger bag that looked like it had countless stories to tell. There was nothing flashy about him, and perhaps because of that, he blended in perfectly. Yet anyone who looked closely could sense something special, a quiet confidence that came from years of building something meaningful. He didn't seem bothered by the rush around him. Instead, he offered gentle smiles to overwhelmed travelers and even helped an elderly woman with her carry-on. But here's where our story takes an interesting turn. Right behind him stood Victor Harding, Richard's complete opposite. Designer suit, Italian leather shoes, and cologne that announced his presence. Every gesture seemed calculated to display his importance. Little did Victor know, he was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life, and it wouldn't cost him a penny. Victor's eyes scanned the line and landed on Richard with obvious disdain. "First class, huh?" Victor said with a smirk. "You never know who they let up here these days." Richard turned with a warm, genuine smile. "Well, I guess we're all just trying to get somewhere safely," he replied calmly. Victor frowned, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Look, nothing personal, but you don't exactly fit the first-class image. It's usually reserved for, well, people who've actually made something of themselves." Richard chuckled softly, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. "You know what? You might be right. I've been pretty fortunate in life." When they boarded, fate played its hand. Victor checked his ticket and groaned audibly. Richard was settling into the seat right next to his. "You've got to be kidding me," Victor muttered. Now, you might think this is where Richard would reveal who he was and put this arrogant man in his place. But if you think that, you don't understand true leadership. What he did instead was something far more powerful. Richard looked up with that same warm expression. "Looks like we're travel companions. I'm Richard, by the way." He extended his hand naturally. Victor reluctantly shook it. "Victor, and I have to ask, what do you do for work?" "Oh, I'm in the transportation business," Richard replied modestly, adjusting his messenger bag. Victor's eyebrows shot up. "Transportation? Like what? Driving trucks? Delivery services?" Richard smiled that patient smile. "Something like that, yeah." Victor laughed condescendingly. "I've always found it interesting how people in blue-collar work end up in places like this. Did you win some kind of lottery?" "Well," Richard said thoughtfully, "I think every honest job serves a purpose. Whether you're moving packages or moving money like you probably do." "Investment banking," Victor said proudly. "I move millions of dollars. I create real value, not just moving things from point A to point B." Richard nodded respectfully. "That sounds important. Financial systems certainly help people achieve their dreams." Victor leaned back, satisfied. "Exactly. Which is why I can afford to sit here, while others," he gestured vaguely at Richard. "Well, let's just say some seats cost more than what most people make in a month." But here's what Victor didn't realize. Every word he spoke was digging him deeper into a hole of embarrassment that he would soon find impossible to climb out of. When the flight attendant offered drinks, Victor ordered expensive champagne while Richard simply asked for coffee. "Coffee?" Victor scoffed. "In first class? You really don't know how to live, do you?" Richard stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, Victor, I've learned that happiness doesn't really come from what you're drinking. It comes from appreciating the journey you're on." "That's beautiful," Victor said sarcastically. "Very inspirational poster. But the real world runs on results, not philosophy. Some people are built for success. Others are built to serve those who succeed." Richard's expression grew slightly more serious, though still kind. "I respectfully disagree. I think we all have the capacity to build something meaningful, and more importantly, to lift others up while we do it." Victor's frustration mounted as Richard remained unshakable. Other passengers began noticing the one-sided confrontation. "You know what your problem is?" Victor said, raising his voice slightly. "You're content with mediocrity. You're comfortable being ordinary, but some of us refuse to settle for less than excellence." And that's when something incredible happened. Richard set down his coffee and looked directly at Victor with a question that would change everything. "Victor, can I ask you something? When you achieve all this success you're talking about, who do you share it with? Who celebrates your victories with you?" you? The question hit unexpectedly. Victor's confident facade flickered for a moment. What kind of question is that? A sincere one, Richard said gently. Because all this talk about superiority and being above others, sometimes that comes from a pretty lonely place. I've seen it happen to a lot of successful people. Victor stood up abruptly, his voice carrying across the cabin. Don't you dare analyze me. You drive trucks or whatever it is you do. You don't know anything about real success, about building something that matters. The cabin fell silent. And that's when the moment we've all been waiting for finally arrived. The flight attendant approached, looking slightly nervous. Mr. Sterling, she said respectfully, I wanted to personally thank you for approving the new employee benefits package. My daughter's medical bills. She paused, emotional. Your generosity changed our lives. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victor's face went through a series of emotions, confusion, recognition, then pure mortification. Whispers rippled through first class as passengers began to realize who had been sitting quietly among them. Sterling, Victor whispered. Richard Sterling? As in Sterling Airlines? Richard nodded with a small, embarrassed smile. Yeah, that's me, though I was hoping to just be another passenger today. But wait, remember I told you the most powerful moment wasn't delivered by Richard Sterling? Here's where that twist comes in. Victor sank into his seat, the color draining from his face. I had no idea. I mean, you own this airline, this plane, everything. The business doesn't change what we talked about, Richard said kindly but firmly. How we treat people shouldn't depend on their job title or bank account. It should depend on recognizing that every person has dignity and worth. Victor looked around the cabin, seeing the disapproving stares from other passengers. Passengers flying on the airline he had just insulted the owner of. I'm so sorry. I don't usually, if I'd known. But that's exactly the point, Richard interrupted gently. You didn't know, and you made assumptions. You decided I didn't belong in first class on my own airline because of how I was dressed. But here's the thing, Victor. Everyone belongs somewhere. Everyone deserves basic respect. And this is where Richard Sterling showed us what true leadership looks like. Richard leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had built something from nothing. You know, Victor, I started this airline 30 years ago with one small plane and a dream to make travel accessible to everyone. I've learned that the most important thing isn't the size of your business or your bank account. It's how you make people feel when they interact with you. Victor sat in stunned silence as Richard continued. You mentioned excellence earlier. Real excellence? It's when you can make someone's day better just by how you treat them. It's when you build others up instead of tearing them down. That's the kind of success that actually lasts. Other passengers nodded approvingly. The flight attendant who had thanked him earlier wiped away a tear. As the plane prepared for landing, Victor finally found his voice again. Mr. Sterling, Richard, I owe you more than an apology. I was awful to you, and you responded with nothing but class. I don't know why I acted that way. Richard smiled, that genuine, warm smile of someone who had learned that power means nothing without compassion. We all have moments we're not proud of, Victor. What matters is what we do next. You seem like an intelligent man who just forgot that success means nothing if it costs you your humanity. Victor nodded, tears in his eyes. How do I become better? Start tomorrow, Richard said simply. Be kind to someone who can't do anything for you. Thank the people who serve you. Remember that everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Small acts, but they build character. And here's the twist I promised you. The most powerful moment of this entire story. After landing, Victor watched Richard greet airline employees with the same warmth and respect he'd shown during their conversation. No superiority, no power trips, just genuine appreciation for each person who made his airline work. Victor stood there long after Richard had disappeared into the crowd, holding his phone. Instead of calling his assistant to complain about the flight delay, he called his wife. Hi, sweetheart, he said softly. I love you, and when I get home, I want to hear about your day. Really hear about it. That phone call, that simple choice to connect instead of complain, that was the most powerful moment, because it showed that Richard Sterling didn't just own an airline. He changed a life at 35,000 feet. In the end, we all carry choices that shape who we are. Richard Sterling reminds us that true success isn't about the empire you build. It's about the people you lift up along the way. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more tales of kindness, humility, and the extraordinary power of treating everyone with respect.